This is a compilation of the first edition of Trench Crusade, and yes, I call it that, as it is a summary or introduction to the factions, faithful, heretics and Arabs, i.e. the Sultanate, and some units. After this, I will continue with the second book. During the First Crusade, the Church's armies captures the Holy City. Beneath the holiest of temples, the Knights Templar discovered secret vaults and within them, an ancient demonic artifact. The Templars, blinded by greed and with weakness in their hearts, fell before his knees. They had round a new master. Seeing the unholy wisdom the artifact spoke of, they began trafficking in demons and committing all manner of indescribable rites. This was the first heresy. The armies of the Church withdrew and Jerusalem became a depraved pit where hell and out mortal planes new merged into one. For 8 centuries the Church has undertaken its crusade to recover the Holy City. The landscape has been completely devastated, crossed by thousands of kilometers of mud, trenches and craters. The crusade is now fought with armies wielding terrifying weapons, and both sides evoke supernatural beings of such immense power that they are almost unstoppable. Even with such incalculable power, the armies are stagnant. In the year 1099, the First Crusade captures Jerusalem. The Knights Templar commit the act of supreme heresy. The gate of hell opens on earth and Jerusalem is destroyed in the cataclysm. In 1101, the year of 3 battles, the heretics reinforced by the armies of the Third Circle of Hell, they conquered most of the Levant. 1102, the ancient city of Antioch is fortified and becomes the focal point of resistance against the forces of hell. In 1106, Cobra becomes the first tyrant of the 66. And in the year 1109, the great sultanate of the invincible iron wall of the 2 horns piercing the sky. In the coming decades, Islamic factions unify, the great iron wall of Iskander rises again and strengthens itself against the heretics. In 1117, the legendary 17 martyrs travel to the earthly domains of hell to convert the heretics. They are subsequently captured, tortured and kept in a perpetual state of agony, remaining trapped within burning bronze bulls to this day. 1165, the Old Man of the Mountain and his Hashashins defend the mountain fortress of Alamat. The castle still stands to this day, being under siege for hundreds of years. 1215 to 1306, the Triclavian Wars of War of Faith. The Church is divided and waging a fierce internal conflict. Heretics and demons spread across Europe as the faithful fight among themselves. Millions of people die by sword and fire. 1346 to 1353, Beelzebub unleashed the Black Grail. Tens of millions are infected and mutated, becoming the worst plague in human history. The corpse wars begin. 1429, living Saint Juana de Arc leads the faithful in war to expel the Black Grail from Europe. 1477, the city of Arcus is taken by God and no longer exists. 1503, the war prophet Angelos, guided by Saint Eligius, discovers the formula for aurichalcum steel. Although extremely expensive to produce, the metal proves to be effective against all sonic weapons and is still useful today. 1545, Antioch is completely destroyed by a mysterious infernal weapon. 1573, the Holy Order of the Dragon stops heretics from advancing after the destruction of Byzantium. 1 million heretics are impaled on the hills of Wallachia, Romania. 1595, walls of New Antioch completed. 1666, the year of 6. In a surprise raid, the newly created heretic fleet captures Gibraltar. The maritime fortress becomes the base of heretical operations against Europe. The forces of hell access the Atlantic. 1670, due to constant coastal invasions by heretics, the Crown Fleet of England begins construction of the White Cliffs fortress. 1703, against all odds, a small force of Hebrew knights attack from their secret fortress, destroying the Templar fortress in Acre. 1805, the heretic fleet under the command of Grand Captain Reindeer defeats the fleet of England at the Battle of Blood Cliffs. Admiral Nelson dies in combat. 1866, in the greatest of heretical scientific secrets, aided by the demon Marbus, they build the first modern submarine. 1870, expelled from Gibraltar, the heretic submarine fleet takes a heavy toll on the Navy's merchant vessels. As a result, widespread famine. 1872, heretical forces assault the city of Rijeka. They are fortified and the heretical conquest is launched against the European continent. 1894, the year of the Broken Trinity. The Death Commandos simultaneously assassinate the Supreme Pontiff, the High Prophetess Ilia and the Holy Roman Emperor. The faithful are immersed in confusion. The heretic legions, commanded by the nobles of the Seventh Circle of Hell and a huge vanguard of tanks, launch a simultaneous lightning offensive in the Levant and Europe. 1910 The Battle of Cordoba, a bloody stalemate. Heretic artillery devastates the ancient city, but the heretic forces fail to gain access to the heart of Hispania. 1914 Today. Both sides are preparing for major offensive operations. Across the vast expanses of no man's land, furious skirmishes and raids increase in intensity as faithful and heretics compete for information, powerful relics, and securing strategically important positions. The Principality of New Antioch. From the official and true annals of church history as told by Melchior Gasil, 1910 AD. New Antioch. For 300 years, the Principality of New Antioch has stood defiantly as the focal point of the church and the faithful at the very edge of the shadow cast by the gate of hell. It is the home of all our hopes, the bulwark against heretical forces and the first line of defense against the power of the devil. If New Antioch falls, the entire Levant will be lost. War has never left this corner of the world. The ancient city of Antioch was destroyed by a mysterious demonic weapon in the year 1545, but the faithful never abandoned their positions in the ruins. Despite the deadly demonic essence emanating from the crater left behind, the garrison held out, even as mighty Constantinople fell to the legions of Chimres, Marquis of Hell. Before being destroyed, the ancient city of Antioch was always the first line of defense tested. Therefore, it is not surprising that in 1559 the Sword Congress of Vienna agreed to rebuild and fortify the city, and that all faithful nations sent an annual tithe to New Antioch, although this tax is rarely carried out formally, of currency. Instead, endless supply trains of food, tools, ammunition, weaponry, machinery, and skilled workers and engineers come from across Europe and the Mediterranean Sea, as well as from African dominions. Keeping supply routes open is a constant game of cat and mouse, as heretic infiltrators and raiders harass the caravans and ships that allow the principality to exist to this day. Since those days, New Antioch has grown to become the most important fortress city in the world, the sword and shield of Europe and Africa. All the princes of the church and heads of the various states and dominions who oppose hell understand that it is best to fight their battles against the heretics far from their core lands. To this day, New Antioch has withstood 8 major sieges, and its famous walls, with their 77 mighty towers, have never been breached. This is due in part to the hundreds of anchorites, metal battle shrines with devotees entombed within, that are embedded in the walls, keeping a watchful eye day and night. More than anything, it is the volunteers who come to serve under the flag of Christ who ensure the continued existence of the principality. Thus, on the streets of the city you can hear hundreds of languages and dialects. One could observe the hussars of the Polish Lithuanian community rubbing shoulders with the last remnants of the Varangian Guard, or listen to the sermons of a street preacher from Ireland extolling the soldiers of Ethiopia to give their lives for the cause. Maybe you can even witness the procession of church engineers carrying their latest invention to be tested on the front lines. All of this happens under the watchful eye of the Office of the Propagation of Virtue that tirelessly patrols the streets. While they are quite happy to turn a blind eye to the soldiers' revelry, they fiercely pursue even the slightest deviation from church doctrine. The execution of heretics is a weekly spectacle that attracts huge crowds. Factories belch black smoke as newly built tanks leave the workshops. The foundries burn red hot day and night to keep the artillery battalions, the pride and joy of New Antioch, at full strength. In the city's technolaboratories, the church works to create superhuman communicants empowered by the cloned flesh and blood of the Redeemer. Thousands of workers give their lives in terrible accidents and overwork every year, and large statues celebrating their sacrifices stand around the city. Despite all these preparations, it is a sad reality that New Antioch could never withstand the full attack of the combined heretical forces. Only thanks to the fierce and bloody internal conflict between the demons has allowed the principality to survive to this day. The archdevils and the princes of hell argue and conspire with each other, and only rarely does one of them gain supremacy long enough to mount a full-scale invasion. Although the war has raged 4 centuries with decades of nervous pause between great battles, the rulers of hell are immortal, and for them the war has only just begun. They are beings that have existed before time existed and wish to taste the agony of mortals who die by the millions. And so the Great War continues, sometimes with long years of silence followed by sudden and ferocious attacks. As the nominal supreme commander of all faithful armed forces, the Duke of New Antioch is a title of unrivaled prestige and honor. But, despite having sworn loyalty to the Duke, in reality the troops who come to fight against hell, coming from all over Christendom, operate in their own units and receive orders from their own leaders. It is worth noting that some soldiers renounce their citizenship, take up the cross and come to serve only under Duke Constantine. Therefore, the standing army of the principality is the greatest fighting force the faithful can muster, and those who serve within the walls of the Home of Hopes are rightfully proud of their leader. After raging for 8 centuries, the Great War has produced a bewildering variety of weaponry, equipment and armor, and due to the power of both heaven and hell taking active role on the battlefields, a warband participating in the Trench Crusade often has a fascinating and exotic panoply of both ancient and modern weapons. It was the work of the followers of Saint Eligius, the patron saint of metal workers, that allowed the weaponsmiths and armorers of the Holy See to produce steel alloys imbued with divine light, metals more malleable and harder than any normal steel. Though the cost is enormous, suits of armor can be wrought that are able to withstand a hail of bullets. This excellence of the infantry field armor remains to this day, keeping abreast with the advances of firearms and explosives. Meanwhile, the heretic legions have gained access to hellish metals from the twisted crucibles of Tartarus, exceeding the strength of mundane steel though often at a terrible cost, for carrying such weapons or donning an infernal suit of armor burns both the body and the soul, leaving behind festering wounds that never heal. Thanks to these advances in metallurgy, titanic artillery pieces exceeding 300 feet are constructed in the foundries of New Antioch, while the forges of hell turn out truly colossal machines of death of their own. The largest known piece, the dreaded mouth of hell, measuring a staggering 666 feet in length and boasting 1,666 millimeters in caliber. The massive artillery barrages pockmark no man's land, creating a hellscape on earth between the heretic and faithful forces. It is over these pieces of land that the warbands of both sides travel, scouring every inch for usable weapons, holy objects of power, ammo, food, armor and more. Due to the protection offered by modern armor, close-quarter combat is frequent and brutal. Trench clubs and polearms, lead-tipped great maces and hell-forged swords are all used to deadly effect when storming enemy trenches. Enemies such as heretic anointed are often so heavily armored that only concentrated effort can bring one of these survivors of the lake of fire down, and even then, they often have to be finished off in brutal melee combat with misericordia daggers, looking for a chink in their unholy armor. Those brave, or suicidal, enough wield anti-tank hammers, polearms with explosives powerful enough to shatter even the strongest armor. Still, the humble bolt-action rifle is the workhorse of the battlefield, and most soldiers and heretic legionnaires carry it. Many other weapons, although rarer, are in common use: machine guns, sniper rifles, shrapnel and gas grenades, as well as experimental antimaterial rifles, while the heretical forces are equipped with blades of eternally burning fire, living bullets that infect his targets and turns them into metastatic vessels of undead, forever bound in servitude to the daemons, and heavy flamers forged in the iron pits of Dis, belching the flames of the lake of fire where damned souls wither for the whole eternity. With both infernal and divine powers actively at work on earth, holy icons, symbols, cursed trinkets and unholy artifacts are carried by soldiery of all ranks. Their power is undeniable and has turned the tide of many a battle. Martyrdom pills are taken regularly by trench crusaders looking to take the enemies of God down with them. They immune the faithful against pain and exhaustion but extract a brutal toll after their effect wanes. Many trench pilgrims wear iron capirogues that both shield their minds from the horror of the creatures of hell, but also incorporate a gas mask in their design, the useful feature on battlefields where the use of chlorine and mustard gas, as well as more dire fumes created by the twisted chemists in the bulges of Inferno, is commonplace. Elite forces have even more advanced and esoteric equipment and arms. For example, the observers of the Synod of Strategic Prophecy wear a specially constructed helmet which allows them to hear the voice of God, and thus allows them to perceive immediate past, present and future simultaneously to a degree. This allows them to perform martial feats unrivaled, but it comes at a cost. A living human is not meant to hear the holy words, and as the voice of God never decays, they must concentrate with superhuman focus to hear what they need to pick the right course of action. Sleep is impossible with the divine echo ringing in their ears. Heavy sedation and use of mind-altering drugs is necessary for them to withstand the heavy burden of their battlefield role for any length of time. The accompanying picture shows the trench pilgrims of the procession of the Sacred Affliction. They are known for their zeal for close quarters combat, their icon armor and shields, which despite appearances can withstand machine gun bullets, and the millstones they carry in order to tie them around the necks of sinners before they suffocate them in the mud and blood of the no man's land. The rifle and the trench club are prepared against the day of battle, but vengeance is of the Lord. Battle Psalms 17:7, New Orthodox Syncretic Bible. Observers. When the need is great, the Synod of Strategic Prophecy sends its famous observers to support the war effort. This order of warrior monks live a life of absolute solitude, sharpening their minds and bodies to become living weapons in the hand of God. Once a soldier joins the order, he rarely leaves the temple of the word. The only exception is when he is summoned to the battlefield, a situation in which his unique abilities can decisively shift the balance in favor of the faithful. Even the slightest disturbance in your prayers or training will mean that you will not be able to communicate with the Lord of all creation. Thus, the observers spend their days in isolated and cloistered cells, when they are not practicing their martial or mental disciplines. Observers wear a specially designed Oculus headset that allows them to tune into the voice of God. This remarkable connection gives them the ability to simultaneously perceive the immediate past, present, and future, to a certain extent. This allows them to perform unparalleled martial feats, but a living human being is not meant to hear the holy words, so it comes at a cost. Since the voice of God never wanes, you must concentrate with superhuman focus to extract just the right guidance amidst the narrative that extends from the beginning of creation to the present moment. The resonance of the divine echo, which resonates incessantly in their ears, makes it impossible for them to sleep. Therefore, they must resort to powerful sedatives and mind-altering drugs in order to bear the heavy burden of their role on the battlefield for an extended period of time. The watchers diligently practice reciting the words of God, granting them the power to give orders to anyone they address, whether friend or foe. The special metal of their helmet allows them to replicate the holy word as closely as possible, forcing any creature in creation to momentarily obey them to a certain extent. Although they are proficient in many weapons, the trench polium is the observer's preferred choice. This tool allows them to deftly jump over barbed wire and fall into enemy trenches with devastating force. Guided by the omniscient words of the Almighty, they possess the ability to evade almost any attack. With proper concentration, they foresee impending attacks within the God's eye crystal built into their helmet. As such, enemies' efforts to take them down are often thwarted, as the observer simply moves the minimum necessary to avoid any damage, knowing exactly where the heretic's blow was going to land. However, even the slightest lapse in their concentration means they could lose the voice of God that guides them, making them as vulnerable to death as any other mortal soldier. The heraldry of the Synod represents the sword and crown, symbolizing service to God through war, while the clouds and stars represent the Synod's mission to communicate directly with the Lord. Paladins. Since the beginning of the Great War, some 800 years ago, the faithful have faced a problem that seems impossible to overcome. They cannot take the battle to the enemy. For such is the supernatural power of the open door to hell, that even approaching it is impossible for all but the most willful and pious. Within hell await the domains of the lost and legions of demons. But in the utmost secrecy, the Church produced an answer to this dilemma, the Paladin program. Paladins are by far the greatest creations of the Mendelist order. They are almost perfect communicants because the purest blood that the Metachrist program has been able to produce flows through their veins. Paladins are warriors of such physical stature and inner holiness that they can not only approach Jerusalem's Valley of Tears, but also enter the gates of hell themselves and undertake quests within hell itself, and return to tell the tale. Each one is said to represent the near perfection of the human form, both mind and body, although greatly scarred and burned by the long centuries of war they have been forced to endure for the good of all in creation. The Paladins reside in secluded cells within a secret wing of the Castel Sant'Angelo until the time comes and the Council of Saints sends them to fight. At that moment, the Paladin emerges from his seclusion, goes to his armory chamber and kneels in the center, on the mosaic of Christ militant, the lion. They are then armed and armored by blind and castrated servants, since the servants of the Church must not fall upon the Paladin any impure gaze or carnal desire, and one of the cardinal generals informs them about their mission. They are granted last rites prematurely should they fall, as there is no mission more dangerous than war within Gehenna. There were originally 12 Paladins, but now only 9 remain. 2 have fallen in battle and 1 is rumored to have become a traitor, although the Church vehemently denies such slander under penalty of death. Despite relentless efforts, the Mendelist Holy Order has been unable to produce a single new Paladin in the past 3 centuries. It has proven equally difficult to replace their sacred armor and weaponry. Since the destruction of the holy city of Jerusalem, it has not been possible to collect more Golgothic tektites necessary for the process of mechanizing the Paladins' armaments. Thus, their elaborate armor, despite the meticulous care of the dicastery at the service of the Church's militant disciples, is badly marked, burned and corroded, and many pieces of armor have been scheduled to be reforged in the vain hope that even the smallest fragment of the necessary materials could be recovered. Thus, each paladin is forced to endure searing pain unlike any earthly suffering where their armor has been weakened, relying on their unwavering faith during their lonely crusades toward doom. Each of the 9 circles of hell has its own foul atmosphere and deadly environment, from noxious vapors to scorching heat to bitter coldness below absolute zero, requiring specific armor to resist the infernal elements. Thus, when a paladin enters the gates of hell, he knows that he must succeed alone or die trying. He will receive no help, not even from someone in his own order. Paladins are used only under the orders of the Council of Saints, and even then very sparingly. Each mission they undertake must bring great and tangible benefits to the Church and the overall war effort, and their long-term benefit must be determined by the Synod of Strategic Prophecy. Paladins have missions such as exterminating the key nobles of hell, destroying laboratories creating some devastating new variant of the Black Grail, or interrogating demons with holy fire and the blood of the Lamb until they abandon their infernal plans. Here appears Jerin, paladin of the 3rd circle of hell. He stands about 17 feet tall when he is prepared for battle. Trench pilgrims. As war rages against the minions of hell, strange visions torment the faithful around the world. Men and women touched by heaven receive visions and messengers of God make revelations. Sisters of the holy orders are marked with stigmata and take up the sword and cross as instructed by the angels. Those who have transgressed seek to atone for their sins by taking with them into the afterlife as many of the devil's followers as they can. So come the mad and the maimed, the God-touched and the guilt-ridden, all gathering around the prophets and prophetesses, forming trench pilgrim processions, disorganized groups that arm themselves and follow the Lord's prophets to the front lines. They fight with unparalleled zeal, charging at heretics and arming themselves with everything they can get their hands on, from the oldest muskets to whips and Molotov cocktails. Pilgrims are not officially sanctioned by the Holy See, but the Church blesses the crusades of the faithful. As such, processions of pilgrims are a common sight on battlefields, often charging across no man's land in suicidal attacks on heretics, directed by the visions of the prophets and prophetesses who lead them, and urged on by the whips of the punishers, charged with instilling the fear of God in their troops. Most pilgrims are men and women with little military training, but when they don the iron hood of a trench pilgrim, they can face even a demon from the deepest bulges of hell without flinching. Death is not necessarily the end of their mission. Sometimes the 7th Metachrist will deem a fallen pilgrim worthy and bring them back as a martyr penitent, warriors halfway between heaven and earth, able to fight once more and feel no pain from bullets or bayonet stabs. Rarer and more dangerous are the stigmatized nuns, holy sisters who manifest wounds matching those of the 3rd Metachrist whom the nuns venerate. They excel in hand-to-hand combat, for each bleeding wound they suffer makes them stronger, not weaker, as their devotion to suffering as their Lord once did gives them a strength and resilience not found in ordinary mere mortals. Armed with swords and guns, they cross no man's land without concern for any danger, praying to receive wounds for the Redeemer who will in turn transform them into the Lord's own vengeance. Ecclesiastical prisoners are led to the pilgrim trench, captured enemies of the true faith forced to perform a final act of contrition or willing sinners seeking redemption. Each is strapped with high-powered explosives that detonate once they reach enemy lines. They run through the killing fields in the hope of miraculously surviving the blast and escaping, or taking as many of Lucifer's followers with them as they can, depending on their convictions. The most powerful of the pilgrim processions will be accompanied by an anchorite of the shrine, a metal colossus some 12 feet tall, a living altar of war almost completely immune to any harm. The anchorite's interior is covered in spikes and barbed hooks so that the monk controlling this colossus is in a constant state of torment, rejoicing in the pain so that he may suffer as his Lord once did. In combat they wield adamantine Catherine wheels of massive proportions which they use to crush sinners and heretics to a pulp, then skewer them on the wheel as a warning to others. There is a bewildering number and variety of trench pilgrim processions. Penitents of pious vengeance swear in the name of Saint Olga and use flamethrowers, incendiary grenades and incendiary ammunition to attack heretics. Iron Road pilgrims follow Saint Rita of Cassia and go into battle with hammers, maces, clubs and cudgels, driving nails into their heads in memory of the saint they venerate. Rome's Theban Legion carries the heads of heretics on their banners in memory of their patron, Saint Maurice. They fight with swords and other edged weapons, competing with each other for the number of heretic heads they amass. The Trent pilgrims of the procession of the Holy Affliction are known for their love of hand-to-hand combat, their armor decorated with icons and shields adorned with depictions of saints, which despite appearances can withstand machine gun bullets, and the millstones they carry to tie around the necks of sinners before suffocating them in the mud and blood of no man's land. The heavens will darken, the earth will open, and the cries of the damned will resound through the centuries. Novi Revelations 99 hours 24 minutes. Heretic Legion. A shroud of darkness covers the world. Smoke and brimstone pour from the open gates of hell and envelop the lands where people have abandoned God and openly declare war against his creation. It is a stark reality that 1/3 of humanity has bowed down to the idols of hell. The main satanic military force on earth are the heretic legions, formed from these citizens of the damned. Spies are sent into the domains of hell under special absolution from the Cardinal Protector. Most are captured and never seen again, save for a few whose eternally screaming heads are returned to New Antioch, marked with bleeding runes mocking the Holy Trinity. Yet some manage to return to the light, whispering of the horrors they have witnessed, firstborns thrown into the mouths of burning statues of Baal and human flesh sold by the pound in terrible markets. They speak of the great idols of the golden calf and of ecstatic men and women prostrating themselves before them, carving layers of their own flesh into ecstatic offerings. Inverted pyramids and towers sink into the depths of these cities, built of iron and black stone. Within these pits lie sacrificial altars where captives wail and are slowly sliced to death over agonizing days and weeks with wicked knives made of hellish basalt. Cathedrals of the princes of hell hang from great arches of volcanic stone, while the damned are crucified on hundreds of inverted crosses. Tales tell of vast factories made of mutilated flesh and metal, whose forges churn out endless munitions for the ongoing war. Guided by the teachings of the smiths of Tartarus, alchemists toil on colossal weapons and armored behemoths, wielding the forbidden secrets of their patron's metallurgy to forge instruments of death and suffering beyond the reach of any human engineer. Once proud cities of earth, where churches have been torn down and entire populations are now dedicated to toppling the throne of heaven itself. Among the abandoned citizens who linger in hell's earthly domains, the highest status is accorded to soldiers fighting in the Great War. But joining the army of damnation is no easy task. Those who wish to earn a place among the heretic legions must make an unholy pilgrimage to the fiery bronze gates of hell where, even from leagues away, the hellish heat scorches both flesh and spirit until the pain becomes unbearable. In the Vale of Tears, the great road leading to the gate, paved as it is with moaning and wailing souls, is strewn with endless piles of charred bodies. Many remain half alive, writhing in agony, trapped in a grotesque twilight between life and death, their wickedness deemed insufficient. These discarded souls are doomed to writhe in agony until the day of judgment. Those who come within sight of the maw of hell are deemed worthy and are initiated into the legions, taking unbreakable vows that chain them to darkness for all eternity, their bodies branded with the mark of the demon lord who has claimed them. The armories of hell equip them for battle and heretic priests call forth new supplicants as the whispers of their archdevil patrons dictate. Thus a new heretic legionary is born. They hail the archdevils as their masters and are thus damned for all eternity. There are those, however, who go further to the very gate and beyond. Their very flesh is set alight, never to recover, but those with the darkest souls can enter hell itself. Among these, the anointed are especially revered among the legions. They are the paragons of unbridled brutality, men and women of colossal stamina and unwavering devotion. After walking the cursed path to the shores of the lake of eternal flame, where the damned wither and writhe in unceasing torment, the anointed emerge forever scarred by the embrace of the abyssal fires. The blackened and charred flesh of the anointed will never heal, but in return they are granted the right to wear suits of heavy Gehenna armor and gain the strength to wield weapons a normal man could barely lift. It is said that looking into their eyes one can see the reflection of the very flames of hell itself, forever etched into their vision. However, some who witness it go even further in their depraved devotion. Suicide is a mortal sin, and many embrace it with enthusiasm. Most cry out for the demons to realize that their ultimate sacrifice is in vain, for the noble infernals are capricious and delight in betraying their own as much as their enemies. But those with truly evil and depraved souls are resurrected in scorn of the Redeemer, and return as choristers, hideous mockeries of creation whose severed heads sing unholy hymns praising the devil, and their voices make the ears of their enemies bleed. Though the vast majority of heretic legions are made up of mortal humans, hell often sends its own abominable progeny to reinforce its mortal foot soldiers, nightmarish warbeasts made from captured and possessed creatures and fearsome artillery witches who act as mobile artillery supporting lightning assaults. Thus, in this cursed theater of war, mortals and abominations march hand in hand, bound by the suffering bonds of damnation. The wails of tortured beasts merge with the shrieks of damned souls, as the heavens rain fiery punishment upon all who dare oppose the heretics' relentless crusade for an insane parity with their creator. From a very young age, a select group of young heretics are sent beyond the gates of hell to be raised as death commandos. Few are chosen, fewer still return, but those who complete their training are among the elite of the heretic legions. Entrenched in the seventh circle of hell, they learn the lethal arts of slaying damned souls from the greatest murderers and murderers whose souls now reside in hell. There they receive brutal training, mastering the use of all manner of weapons and poisons and receiving instruction in martial skills from the personal guard of the archdemon Beleth. They learn to slither like snakes across the battlefield, leaving murder in their wake. Their specially forged Tartarus claws are tempered in the waters of the river Styx, a source of venom more potent than any mortal poison. Many carry silenced pistols to take down targets unseen and unheard. In addition to their weapons, death commandos are equipped with stealth generators that operate by diffracting light, using the heart of an innocent, and infernal technologies that hide them from the eyes of God. Once their training is complete, death commandos emerge from the abyss as silent specters of carnage. Of the heretic troops fighting in the trenches of the Great War, death commandos are the most feared by the faithful. Most infamous in the ranks are three master death commandos, Cain, Barabbas, and Haman, who simultaneously assassinated the Supreme Pontiff, the High Prophetess Ilia, and the Holy Roman Emperor in the year 1894. This put the forces of the Church into turmoil and allowed the heretic legions to launch a lightning offensive across the Levant and Europe. Death commandos have their tongues ceremonially torn out at the end of their training. They will never speak of what they have learned, and their unnerving silence contributes to their sinister reputation. They communicate with each other through a complex system of inscrutable hand signals. We are no longer weak supplicants trembling before a merciless God. Decimos, blessed are the brave in spirit, for they shall ride the whirlwinds. Ramon, the anointed of the 21st Heretic Legion, the Widowmakers. From a young age, all heretics are taught that God tyrant YHWH demands obedience, but there are always brave souls who chafe at the yoke of divine oppression. In their bitter rage, these dauntless ones commit a form of ritual suicide to spit in the despot's eye, knowing they have not the strength to injure him, apart from this little rebel lion. Suicide is a mortal sin, and sacrificing yourself to the glory of hell is a yet greater affront to God. Some heretics born with a gift of sonorous voice but little prospects of rising through the ranks. Those possessing a determination to excel nevertheless may pursue the dark path of becoming a chorister. Such supplicants go to one of the black altars of heretic abodes at the bottom of the deep inverted pyramid temples dedicated to the greatest of archdevils. There they are dressed in the robes of dark devotion, lie on the altar and mutilate themselves to death by carving unholy runes into their flesh. The more wounds they can suffer before perishing, the more pleasing it is said their offering is. The most devout slice their own throats, trying to cut as deep as they can before their miserable life leaves them. Most such wretches go to their doom in the lake of fire, but some are reborn as choristers after 9 days. Their corpses lurch back to their feet, and finish their grisly beheading, and lift their severed heads that begin to sing hymns they have learned in the inferno. From their self-inflicted wounds spurts cold blood that forms diabolic symbols and changes to match the words of their unholy chorale. They head towards the front lines driven by a call no living can hear and join the heretic warband of their choosing. As their severed heads sing their agonizing hymns, the minds of their enemies are filled with visions from the pits of hell, weakening both the resolve and strength of those unfortunate enough to hear the dire song of a chorister. Their hymns are often the first thing a fresh recruit experiences on the battlefield, as their unholy voice rolls across the trenches, proclaiming a never-ending prophecy of the final victory of hell over heaven. The great military hospice of New Antioch has a separate wing for those who have never recovered from hearing choristers' dirge, their minds forever lost in a vision of eternal damnation, tied to their iron-frame beds, screaming of the world to come when all is covered under the darkness lit only by eternal flames. Epidemics of typhus, malaria, typhoid, smallpox, yellow fever, pneumonia, trench fever, Marquisian disease and countless others ravaged the trenches and battlefields of the Great War, but they all pale in comparison to the most dreaded of them all, the Black Grail. Beelzebub, Lord of the Flies, stands apart from the other lords of hell, who act mainly through their mortal followers. Instead, when he periodically gains supremacy in the bitter power struggles of the archfiends, he sends forth his deadliest curse. infused with demonic essence from the bowels of the seventh layer of hell, where the putrid fortress of Beelzebub stands, spews forth a torrent of demonic hellflies, scorpions, locusts and other infernal insects. The Hellgate opens and a veritable tidal wave of foulness emerges, flowing across the land at startling speed, consuming everything and leaving indescribable horror in its wake. After 9 days the insect swarm exhausts itself, devouring its own in its insatiable hunger. The Black Grail is indiscriminate in its hatred of all living things. Its infections can spread to virtually any living biological matter, which bursts forth with tumors, boils and weeping pustules. Puddles and ponds of melted flesh are left in its wake, endless mouths left screaming in their agony, for the Black Grail destroys the body but leaves the mind intact to suffer. The scientist priests of the church and the alchemists of the Sultanate fervently look for a way to inoculate their people against this foulest of diseases, but thus far they are without success. The only answer is to burn the infected settlements with specially constructed flamethrower tanks that use holy anointing oil as the fuel for their weapons. But if this is not done, or the countermeasures are too late, what happens next is even worse. Bodies of men, horses, dogs, insects and other animals of every kind that are infected by the Black Grail lurch to their feet, driven by a demonic will. Not living, not dead, they become vessels to spread the corruption of their master ever further, forming warbands that strive to find and infect life of any kind. They also gather things that mortals value and bring this loot as well as grisly trophies to the feet of the idols of Beelzebub they erect. Thus the cult of the Black Grail mocks the devotions of the faithful and their prayers. At the head of such warbands stand the Knights of the Order of the Fly, those most depraved men and women who willingly embrace the Black Grail and whose devotion Beelzebub finds sufficient. They are granted weapons, armor and equipment corrupted by the hand of the Archfiend in exchange for sacrifices brought to the altars of Beelzebub, which these warbands build wherever they go, objects of grisly horror constructed from the remains of their victims shaped into the form of monstrous flies. The contaminating effect of the Black Grail is the gift of Beelzebub, the Lord of the Flies. Spread by the insects raised by his own hand in the seventh layer of hell, it is a wave of his filth in the form of demonic vermin, septicemia, contaminated insects, plagues and impurities that contaminate both body and soul. Entire towns and cities are turned into a semi-living sludge bubbling on the ground, an agony of melted flesh that trembles and cries at the multiple diseases bestowed upon them by the Lord of the Flies. Those caught by the Black Grail are still aware of the horrible fate that has befallen them. Specialized units from New Antioch and the Free State of Prussia are dedicated to responding to these outbreaks with heavy flamethrower tanks that use holy anointing oil as fuel. But some victims of the Black Grail suffer a far worse fate. They are granted the Black Honor by fusing with hell flies, and become a grotesque winged insect made of bloated flesh. After this torturous metamorphosis, they take to the air as heralds of Beelzebub, the winged squires and scouts of the Order of the Fly. Their vestigial human bodies are still conscious as they are slowly devoured from within to be used as fuel by the herald, all while their deformed bodies fight for the glory of hell against their will. Heralds are the vanguard in any assault on the Black Grail, and the deafening hum of their wings strikes terror into any defender, breaking their concentration and sapping their willpower. Heralds wield discarded weapons, tainted with hideous maggots that churn through them, which in turn infect their victims. Each diseased bullet has its own sensitivity, finding even the tiniest chink in any armor, burrowing into the nervous system and liquefying internal organs from within. When the tide of Black Grail comes, many mortals cry out to Beelzebub in their despair, hoping that the Lord of the Flies would spare them in exchange for worship and servitude. But their prayers fall on deaf ears, for the Prince of Gehenna hates all creation and only wishes to warp it into a form pleasing to him and hateful to God. But there are few mortals, exceedingly rare, who truly share the vision of Beelzebub and wish the world to end in a putrid, parasite-infested mass, eternally writhing in the throes of the endless plagues bestowed upon them by the Black Grail. Many of them are secret and highly skilled killers, men and women whose pleasure is to murder repeatedly, plying their craft in secret, wishing one day to do it openly. From amongst such twisted individuals the most depraved are inducted into the ranks of the unholy Order of the Fly, known as Plague Knights. When the Black Grail comes, they come out calmly and welcome the wave of corruption, not consumed by it but rather warped into a cadaver-like creature halfway between life and death. They retain sentience, intelligence and a dim memory of their past lives, making them extremely useful at leading the Black Grail into the isolated farmsteads and remote settlements that might otherwise escape the clutches of Beelzebub. The more living creatures a Plague Knight can find and warp beyond recognition, the higher they will climb in the ranks of the Order of the Fly, and the greater the favor they will find in the eyes of Beelzebub. Amongst their rank there are 12 plagued knights of great renown, made in mockery of paladins of the church, great champions of the fly. They dwell within Ekron, the city of Beelzebub, a place of such wilting horror that none dare to approach it, not even the mightiest of heretic lords. But sometimes the orders of their lord come to their ears, and then the mightiest of plagued knights strike forth, following orders carried out by the deafening buzz of trillions of beating wings of hell flies. When the infidels opened the thrice-cursed gate of Jahannam, unleashing Gog and Magog upon the believers, it seemed that all was lost and that Shaitan would emerge victorious over Dunya. But the Creator of the universe came to the aid of the faithful, and as it was written, the great iron wall of Dhu al-Qarnayn manifested itself in the lands ruled by the Sultan of Rum. A call was sent out to those who believe rightly, and over the following decades the migration of all the faithful, second in importance only to the Hegira of the Prophet himself, took place across Europe, Asia and Africa. Millions perished on the road and at sea, for the heretics and their Shaitan overlord swarmed over them like locusts swarming over ripe sesame fields, devouring them and building vile monuments and statues out of their limbs and heads, so that they could not be buried as decreed in the holy texts. But once all those who survived the journey arrived, the mighty gates of Al-Qarnayn were closed and the great sultanate of the invincible iron wall of the two horns that pierced the sky was formed. Since then, the attacks of Jahannam's slaves against the Sultanate have not ceased, and every day new martyrs are mourned who defend the wall and confront the heretics who have overcome its defenses. But within the walls, lost knowledge flourishes, and from mosques of white marble and gold, the Muezzin calls upon the faithful to pray for the success of the Sultan's army in its fight to protect the lands within the wall and defend the caravan routes that provide the Sultanate with vital trade goods. The Iron Wall is the greatest defensive work in the world, a mighty bulwark adorned with the Sultan's famed artillery. Azeb marksmen stand ready, ever alert for surprise attacks, and elite Janissary regiments are quartered at set intervals near the wall so they can react to any attack quickly. During a more serious raid, all Azeb are summoned, the House of Wisdom unleashes its terrifying Tarquin creations upon the enemy, and if the need is desperate, the Sultan himself comes forward and his Janissaries march with him into battle, carrying the green banner of the Prophet before them. Thus, the protection of the Iron Wall has had a major influence on the Sultanate's way of waging war. The recruited Azebs are adept at feigning flight and skirmishing, while the lions of Jabir harass the enemy's flanks. Meanwhile, the Sultan's magnificent artillery bombards the enemy on its tortuous journey across the battlefield riddled with traps laid by the skilled sappers. When they reach the ranks of the faithful, the Janissaries, the elite troops of the Sultan's house, close in and cut down the enemy with their devastating countercharge led by their iron-willed officers. The fearsome assassins of Alamut prowl the winds of time, attacking enemy elites and leaders, while the alchemists at the House of Wisdom unleash devastating weapons made lethal by their mastery of the elements, capable of overcoming the defenses of virtually any enemy. Beyond the Iron Wall, the Sultan's forces operate in small mobile companies, each with a particular mission to accomplish. They pursue apostates who have gone to serve the Shaitans, seek out relics from the time of the prophets, or attempt to recover lost treasures and books of knowledge from the ruins of fallen caliphates. Although there is an understanding between the Church and the Sultanate to be co-belligerents against Jahannam, the commanders of these expeditions will not tolerate any interference and will not hesitate to crush those who hinder their mission. Resentment against the infidels who unleashed Gog and Magog runs deep in the Sultanate, and questions of honor are quickly settled with duels to the death. Woe to those who dare to hinder the mission of those who believe. In the name of Allah, the Gracious, the Compassionate, praise be to Allah, the Beneficent King, the Creator of the universe, Lord of the three worlds, who established the pillarless firmament in its place and who spread out the earth as a bed, and grace, prayer and blessing be upon our Lord Mohammed, Lord of the apostolic men, and upon his family and his entourage, prayer and enduring blessings and grace that will remain until the day of judgment. Janissaries are the Sultanate's elite warriors, schooled from childhood in the arts of war. Captured during raids on the desolate northern and eastern borders beyond the Iron Wall, they are subjected to rigorous martial training and indoctrination from an early age. Through spiritual and alchemical means, bound with invisible chains, their minds are carefully conditioned until they attain complete and unwavering loyalty to the Sultan, and him alone. Their physical attributes are augmented by potent elixirs created by the mystical arts of Jabir. Their ornate armor is forged from the metallic formula that the Sultan's alchemists obtained from the very iron wall that protects the Sultanate from its enemies. These soldiers are also protected by powerful talismans crafted by the blind thaumaturges of the school of meteoric omen. armed with jail rifles, hand mortars, Yatagorn swords, and the devotion etched into their very souls, the Janissaries are formidable opponents. On the battlefield, the Janissaries excel at storming enemy strongpoints and trenches, crushing elite formations, and acting as bodyguards for high-ranking individuals. Though they are used sparingly by the Sultan beyond the Iron Wall, as they are also part of his personal guard, some Janissaries are sent to the front lines to support the cause of the Sublime Gate. Amidst the mud, blood, and dust of the trenches, their richly decorated war panoply creates a beautiful and terrifying spectacle as they charge into enemy lines, fully convinced that paradise awaits those who fall in righteous battle. Glory to the great Sultan, the Padishah of Rum, commander of the believers and successor of the Prophet of the Lord of the Universe, custodian of the invincible iron wall of the two horns that pierce the sky and that protects us from the ravages of Gog and Magog. In the fabled Sultanate of the Iron Wall, deep beneath the golden gardens of Damascus, through the cavern of the sleeper and past the seven gates of potentiality, are the vast laboratories and metaphysical factories of the alchemists. Using the mysterious Jabirian process called Tarquin, the alchemists are able to create artificial life, and produce all manner of strange, wondrous beasts and automatons to delight the masses of the souk, and grace the gardens of the Sultan. Deeper still, in the darkest and most secret reaches of the alchemy complex, past the seven hidden gates of actuality, are the sanctums where the art and science of Tarquin is home to its most keen and deadly purpose. Here they make the dreaded Lions of Jabir. Named after the deadly hunters of the plains, the Lions of Jabir can take many forms, not all of them leonine. Each one is a unique masterwork, and they are grown according to the skills and artistry of the Jabirian scientist that created them. The esoteric arts the Al-Shemaigai employ are learned through study of forbidden books of Solomon, and many alchemists are killed when their experiments fail or run amok. However, the lions are in desperate demand by the army of Sultanate, so the program continues, regardless of cost and casualties. Creating the Lions of Jabir is extremely difficult, and there are endless variables to consider. Because of this, the lions are often malformed in some way. Though still magnificent hunters in war, their malformations often cause their existence to be one of constant physical pain and suffering. The truly tragic cases are the lions created with human-like intelligence, who are racked with existential dread as they realize the horror of their unnatural origins. In battle, the Lions of Jabir are deadly threats and are used as a vanguard of the host of the Sultanate. The Sultan himself has a hunting pack of 77 enormous Lions of Jabir that guard him day and night, and accompany him on the battlefield. The speed and ferocity of the lions is nearly unmatched, and some even have strange powers granted by their alchemical birth. Many have armor melded with the flesh and fashioned from alchemical metals, etched with cryptic seals and sigils, and richly embellished by the alchemist to hide the defects in their creations. The alchemists are the battlefield mystics and artificers of the great Sultanate of the Iron Wall, schooled in the hidden knowledge of the legendary Smaragdine tablet within the House of Wisdom. Admission is open to any with will and intellect deemed sufficient, be they man or woman. To become an alchemist is no easy task, they undergo many trials on their path to mastery. First are the countless lessons of the newly initiated studying the Jabirian corpus, translating the keys of Solomon and learning all the fundamental disciplines of their primeval science. Only after 7 years of study, under the watchful and exacting eyes of the High Al-Shemaigai, is an aspirant allowed to attempt the 3 trials required for full membership in the order. The first trial is to create a suit of alchemist's armor which protects against harm. This is an essential tool of their craft, festooned with the seals of Solomon, which enables them to bend the elements of creation to their will and shields them even from the devices of hell. Next, they must create a Tarquin servant, a homunculus creature of artificial life and intellect. If the candidate manages to follow the complex formula, as well as the intricate timing and temperature requirements, the creature will emerge after 40 days of toil. It will act as the alchemist's living tool of creation, for their hands have fine motor skills well beyond even the nimblest craftsman. Vaguely shaped like a small human, it can change the consistency of its body to an almost liquid-like slime to squeeze into alchemical chambers to do their master's bidding in extreme temperatures and in the fog of poisonous chemical fumes. Many aspirants fail here, and their creation emerges from its golden celestial sphere a deformed monstrosity, filled with hatred towards its creator. It burrows itself into the alchemist's body to consume it from within, wearing its would-be master as a skin. The third and final test is opening their third eye, the key to cosmic illumination which allows them to see the building blocks of creation and thus be able to ensure that the elements they use are in perfect balance. Those that fail their final test are horribly changed. Their third eye swells to nightmare proportions and melds with their original pair, driving the aspirant mad during the process of their deformation. They spend the rest of their pitiful lives screaming of the unseen horrors all around now revealed to them. Out of mercy, alchemists that fail in this way are often put down, but there are rumors of cabals of these living failures kept alive for reasons unknown. An alchemist that has passed all 3 trials is formidable indeed, a master of esoteric powers, able to control fire and ice, metal and liquid, capable of creating intricate mechanical devices and artificial life as well as weapons of calamitous potency. In exchange for the freedom to practice their arts, the alchemists supply the Sultanate with the peerless Jabarian battle lions, and serve on the front lines where their devastating alchemical compounds melt the flesh from the bones of enemies of the believers, dissolving through even the toughest armor. The lands of the Sultanate are vast, and many armies can be raised from the multitude of the provinces, where one household in 20 is required to arm and equip a soldier to serve the ruler of those who believe. Most such soldiers are known as azebs, meaning unmarried, as those with families cannot become azebs, who serve as the light infantry on both land and the sea, as well as guarding the Great Iron Wall against the heretic assaults. When an elite force is sent beyond the wall to strike at the enemy or look for holy artifacts, the recruiters of the Sultan call for volunteers to join the leaders of such expeditions. Though the missions into no man's land are dangerous, there are always plenty of azeb who step forward, there is fame to be won, and chance a plenty to acquire valuable loot. Weaponry of the azebs varies a great deal, as they do not have access to the superb arms, armor and alchemical marvels the elite household troops of the Sultan such as Janissaries and cataphracts do. Most carry jezzails with a distinctive curved stock. These are handmade weapons, and consequently they vary widely in their construction. Jezzails are very personal weapons, well crafted, and their distinct curved stocks are intricately decorated. These long arms can be loaded with all manner of ammunition, fired rough-hewn bullets, long iron nails, or even alchemically treated slivers of the Great Iron Wall. This makes jezzails highly adaptable, and less dependent on easily depleted ammo. Other weapons and equipment include curved daggers and scimitars, pistols, and sappers' equipment. Armor is rare, azebs are often used by their superiors as light skirmishers harass and tie down the enemies while the heavier troops close in for the kill. Their superiors see little reason to waste expensive armor on troops that fall in great numbers and are easily replaceable. Paradise awaits those who die for their faith, after all. Many azebs meet a terrible end in the cruel wars in the trenches, and other return broken in mind and body, but there are always new, hot-blooded recruits willing to risk it all for the Sultan, a chance to kill the hated followers of Shaitan, and return to home as heroes with fabulous stories and glittering gold.
Military expeditions over the Great Iron Wall into no man's land carry many risks, and their commanders are field officers known as Uzbasi. They are expected to lead from the front, and their selection is solely on merit, with no consideration given to family pedigree or wealth. Many are promoted from the ranks of the Janissary Corps. Their bodies are enhanced by the Jabarian alchemical arts, and their minds conditioned by the mystics, allowing them to face any foe unflinchingly. The downside of the mystic mental hardening is their utter disregard for pain and their cold ruthlessness on the battlefield. The casualties, both their own and those of the enemy, as well as those non-combatants who believe, are purely utilitarian to Uzbasi. For is it not just to send heretics to Jahannam, while the warriors who fall in battle will wake in paradise, as has been promised? Under the orders of a powerful pasha or emir, or even the sultan himself, the Uzbasi assumes the command of an elite squad of warriors to fulfill their task, such as to reclaim holy artifacts lost during the catastrophic period when heretics took the Levant by storm. Other times they are told to find and eliminate powerful foes, such as heretic nobles who were once subjects of the sultan, but have turned their backs to Allah. Uzbasi are equipped with superb armor of meteoric iron, the finest carbines gilded with silver and loaded with alchemical shot, and carry kili swords of the past heroes of Sultanate, where great deeds of old are inscribed with golden calligraphy. If they serve the sublime gate well, their name and glory will be etched on the blade, as well to inspire future generations. The strongest carry the dreaded hand cannons which double as deadly halberds, If they are hunters of distinction, they wear pelts of their greatest kills, such as chimeras, as cloaks, which offer protection from the powers of Shaitan. Success brings Yuzbasi the favor of the Sultan, and along with it honor, splendid weaponry of Damascus steel, gold dinars aplenty, and access to the wondrous devices and creatures created by the Jabarian alchemists in the House of Wisdom. Hunting is a noble pursuit within the ranks of the officer corps, and artificial birds of prey and automaton hounds double as potent weapons of war, and are brought along to the front to aid their masters at war. I am the son of many chiefs. My sword is sharp and terrible. It is the mightiest of things when the cauldron of war boils fiercely.
It is with artillery that the Sultan makes his arguments known. Due to the protection afforded by the Iron Wall, the Sultanate has always maintained excellence in artillery. However, the siege guns and heavy mortars that defend those who believe on the ramparts of the wall are far too cumbersome for small expeditionary forces. Thus in the year of the Hijra 821, Sultan Bayezid III commissioned a new creature of war to act as living field artillery. To fulfill this decree, the Jabarian scientists of the Royal Artillery House have labored 4 centuries to perfect the divine art of Tarquin. In their secret laboratories they performed countless experiments, learning many precious and costly lessons in the process. They have devised many things, but none more clever or ingenious than the brazen bull, called Boar by the soldiery of the Sultanate. The brazen bull is a monstrous being of immense power and vitality, capable of tearing even the bastard child of a devil clean in half. The Sultan's armorers equip the bulls with heavy artillery that even the superhuman Janissaries cannot lift, let alone use in battle, flame cannons, volley guns and holy blades blessed by the word of the great protector. Encasing its mighty frame is exquisitely decorated bronze armor of thrice-hardened scales, covered in talismans of protection and the grace of the Creator. On the battlefields beyond the Iron Wall, the brazen bull is an awesome and terrifying sight. It is a single-minded, fearless walking bulwark, a tower and shield which the war parties of the Sultanate rally behind. Such is the power of their weapons that the very earth shakes with their pounding, disrupting the enemy advance even when they fail to slay their target.